We're a group of GenXers learning about our ADHD and neurodiversity later in life. Join us as we discuss interesting clips we find online and how they relate to our own life experiences. Welcome to This Is How My Brain Works.
Welcome again, everyone, to another edition of This Is How My Brain Works. Alongside Krista, Gano, Sarah Hines, Michael Collins, I am Jason Rudofsky. Today's clip and episode is by Dr. Judy Ho with Med Circle, and it is talking about the misconceptions of ADHD. So let's check her out.
Now, what are some common misconceptions when it comes to adults who either believe they have ADHD or have received the diagnosis?
I feel like everybody thinks that they have ADHD, and I think everybody is on the spectrum at some point, at some time. But if you just have inattentiveness occasionally, but it doesn't actually impair your functioning and you're not that distressed about it, then you're not really going to qualify for that diagnosis of ADHD. Adulthood ADHD is relatively at 50% of the prevalence rate as childhood ADHD. So national studies have shown that ADHD in childhood is about 5% of the population. In adulthood, it's 2.5%. So roughly 50% of people recover from ADHD by the time they hit the age of 18, and then 50% go on to continue to suffer symptoms in their adulthood. And I think a big misconception is that it looks the same for some reason, because it doesn't. In adulthood ADHD, the hyperactive and impulsive features look very different. As a child, the child's running around the classroom, getting out of their seat, really being very rule not abiding, which causes them negative attention, and that's usually when the teachers identify them and talk to the parents. In adulthood, they may still have that restlessness, but as adults, we're a bit more controlled in terms of our behavior. Right. So we're not going to be running around when we know we're not supposed to, but you might just feel really fidgety. And so sometimes you see individuals like tapping very nervously on the desk or on the table, and that may be a manifestation of an adulthood form of combined ADHD.
Okay. I mean, well, first of all, something that I recognized later in life, like everything else, was becoming so distressed when faced with either adversity or someone throwing a wrench in, like throwing a monkey wrench into if I had a plan, I would lose it. Could not control my anger. And it boiled up like that. And that word distressed rings pretty true for me. And I'll tell you this much, I'm probably on the 150% that went through childhood with ADHD and then continued on with the ADHD. That it wasn't, I'm not of the 50% that like had ADHD. It's like, oh, it's gone. There you go. No, I think mine continued on. How about you all? Which 50% are you on?
I was surprised to see that it was a lower. I thought the percentages would be higher. She said 5% of the population are kids, and then 2.5% of those, half of those go on to still manifest the ADHD like as an adult. So that makes me feel extra special that I'm part of that small percentage of people that has the adult ADHD. Rudy, just to kind of build on what you were saying, for me, like, it was more, definitely had problems sitting still for an entire class and just without getting up and doing stuff. And I certainly couldn't pay attention for a full class. Even if I was in my desk sitting still. But the, where you said you would get angry at things, like if a plan changed. For me, it was, I would go internal. I'd go inside on that and just kind of I just started at that point building that narrative of like, there's something wrong with me. Why can't I keep up? Or why is someone giving me this type of feedback? Again, there must be something wrong with me. And so it was more of that shame thing, more of an internal thing. But Absolutely. But as an adult, with the adult ADHD, the emotionality piece certainly kicked into gear, and that anger as a second emotion came up, you know, where I would, like, if there were too many things being introduced, like, hold on a second, God damn it, hold on, let me just finish this thing, and then you can come and ask me that, you know, where I'm not able to stay regulated. It's just the getting flooded, just due to the kind of the working memory that we have, which is, you know, it's just not able to handle, you know, our working memory, just a couple pieces, whereas a neurotypical brain can handle, you know, 3, 4, 5 pieces at a time. So anything more that gets introduced to the picture equals flooding and then getting upset. And what I learned was, like, you know, this anger as a second emotion, because I would ask, like, why do I get so frustrated? And it was really a puzzle for me. And until you really talk through, like, these are the reasons why, because in ADHD, your working memory is not able to handle more pieces. Even that information for me is helpful, where I can stay more regulated, because it's like, you know what, I'm putting myself into a position where there's too many things going on. Let me self-correct. Let me get out of that situation. But so signs, like the signs of ADHD in kids, you know, that, like, you know, it very much is like, just can't, you know, the hyperactivity, but not understanding that other type of ADHD, like in a kid, and then the adult ADHD and how that manifests. And then to make it even more broad, you know, how ADHD might manifest differently in girls and women, which is my segue into Krista. Sarah, what you got?
So I wrote down, because I there are 3 things that I thought of. First of all, this is the second time this week that I've heard this idea that ADHD vacillates through life. Like you could have it certain years and not have it other years. And I just didn't, that was not something that I really knew about. So which begs the question for me is there something that needs to be researched around, like, menopause induced ADHD?
Oh, wow.
And so, because I think that's what a lot of us in our late 30s, 40s, and 50s are feeling, starting at perimenopause, is that's when this type of stuff really started for us. Not that there weren't inklings of it, or that we weren't, maybe could have been, looked at earlier, like that there was a foundation of what that was, but that this is when it's surfacing. So that was my first thought. Second thought was, I really struggle with this idea that the only way we diagnose something that's going on with our brains is by dysfunction. That really makes me mad, especially or not mad. It stresses me out, because as a woman, we're not normally dysfunctional in this space. That's why we're not diagnosed, actually, because we're not dysfunctional. We are functioning through it until we hit a menopause or something happens in our life and things start to break down. But if you're only saying, oh, well, in order to be ADHD, you've got to tap your foot a lot, or you have to be the squirrely kid in class, well, you're going to miss out a ton of the girls. So
Krista, what if you can kind of include, because when I was mentioning, you know, anger as a secondary emotion, really for men, like historically, we have like 2 or 3 emotions. It's like we weren't really nurtured in a way to be able to feel comfortable expressing a wider range of emotions. So do you think that that's part of the reason also where women have access to a wider range of emotions, to where ADHD doesn't get picked up quite the same way?
No, I mean, I think it's that we don't always express it as kids as we're running around the classroom being disruptive. We express it through daydreaming, through disassociation, through other ways. And so if you're not, that's why I really like, if you're not running around the room, then you don't have it, is not really, to me, the right way to look at this. No offense to the guest on that push. I'm sure she's incredibly way more knowledgeable than me. It just seems like we've been missing a big piece of the puzzle. And part of what we're missing, where we're missing it, is by saying that you have to be a distress to the people around you in order to be looked at for it. And then the third thing I would say is that I saw this wonderful post this week, and this is why and it brought me to that inner child, that kids, this wonderful post who's a woman who was talking about her work within with people, adult ADHD and autism and kids, that she recommends that every single time that you are getting to that point where you're starting to be flooded, that because as kids you can run and play and shake and do all these things, and no one thinks anything, but we're shut down from that as adults. And she said, think about it in terms of like, if a dog goes through something really, really crazy, they're shaking out that fight or flight moment. And so she's like, I would recommend that you try it, either shaking or squeezing, and that it tells your body that you don't have to be in fight or flight in that moment. So as you're starting to get flooded, I mean, I don't know, I sent it to a couple of my friends who are also like me, women of a certain age who feel like we have maybe menopause induced ADHD. And we're going to try it. We're going to try when we start to feel flooded, like just sort of going in a room and shaking, or like, and I think as actors and, we're sort of used to like moving our bodies, but she's like, move.
There's something that happens physiologically, I think, when you shake it out. So to be able to transition from a distressing situation into, not a distress situation, shaking it out allows for that transition to happen. Something kind of gets expelled from your body.
You're mindful of your own body. Like, whatever's distressing you, it's outside of you're creating all of the distress. But once you come in, and whether I remember doing some Tai Chi in Utah with a gentleman on the edge of a butte in heavy winds, which is, I'm just saying, that's a different story.
Really need you to paint the scene.
Barometric pressure was at about 50.
That was a whole story, but it's like any yoga pose or any of that. You're immediately putting up, some sort of shield where you can, grab a hold of yourself for a minute. You know what I mean? But it's all about becoming aware of yourself and what you need. Well, and you're taking control. You're taking control of your mind and your body by doing that. Here's the problem with me. Because I'm so impulsive. I mean, I'm getting better because I'm learning, but because I'm so impulsive and things come right to the top and bubble right to the top so quickly, I don't have the moment that you're talking about, Krista, where you can say, okay, I'm going to shake it out, right? I'm flooded. I'm already flooded. When those moments come up,
well, right.
I'm learning to find the ability to shake it off before I go over the waterfall.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
I want to make sure that we give Sarah some time to talk. But I also would say about that, Rudy, is that it's this idea that the meltdown does not start in the moment. The meltdown starts because you haven't set yourself up through the day, or things have happened through the day. So by the time you we're flooded, we're 10 things in. So maybe if there's a way to catch, it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but maybe if there's a way to shake it off, start to shake a little earlier in the day, or to, this thing I thought was really very interesting. Anyway, Sarah, I want to make sure you get the floor.
I've enjoyed all of the things I was hearing, so it's hard to interrupt. I want to keep hearing. But I would say the thing that hit me the most is I think those numbers are hilarious and a beautiful effort to quantify sort of the qualitative elements of the people we see around us. And I agree with Krista that the guest on that show is far more knowledgeable about this than I am. However, back to the diagnostics, when the diagnosis is through dysfunction, and also measuring that dysfunction from outside the person, you're bound to miss a lot. So and I thought it was funny because she said and the way she was talking, it was unclear whether that 2.5%, because she said, it's 2.5% because adults have learned how to manage it better, sort of, was the impression I got.
Which doesn't mean we don't have it.
Exactly. Right. It's like, so what's happening is you've gained skills as an adult to conform, and you can you've learned to grow the muscle of that reward center somewhat. And yes, I think we all can. And where it changes, especially as Krista pointed out for women, is when we have these hormonal shifts. So puberty, same with boys. I suspect that you may see a reduction in that behavior at that, whatever, who knows what the researchers will actually say and have discovered or will discover. But I just think that the number of 5% in the population is wrong, because if we're missing girls, it could be as high as 10%. If we're missing guys that are inattentive, it could be another 2.5%. If we're missing where autism looks like ADHD, or where ADHD looks like, where autism looks, where you're misdiagnosed autistic. Good Lord, can I speak today? Anyway. And then,
Sarah, I also think that the adults, it sounds like, are self-reported. So it sounds like it's one of those places of like, I'm so dysfunctional in my own life, I need to go seek something, because you don't have a boss come out and like you do a teacher in school and go, oh, you seem a little squirrely, let's go get you tested, sport. Well, so you don't have that. So of course it's going to go down, because we're all too busy just trying to like scrape through life to be like, I'm going to go get diagnosed for this thing.
I'll take a year off to figure myself out.
Like, you don't do that in the best of times.
Cereal, right?
Except for Michael, who is he's like a man who is just so self-mature. But most of us are not going to go do that,
Having ADHD, you're developing these things subconsciously, these coping mechanisms subconsciously, ways to navigate, ways to, whether it's school or your first couple jobs, social situations, all of that. And when you're on your own, you're really not impacting anybody else, really. I mean, you're having there's always dynamic, and you're always, so there's impact in that way. But like, I mean, I got diagnosed after I was married, before I'm just living on my own, and these whether it's impulsivity or staying up too late, watching every single late night show, and then getting up to, not getting enough sleep or whatever. Yeah. I mean, I'm doing this stuff to myself, but it's not impacting someone else. So when, until you get into a relationship, I think, where it's causing problems.
Or there's natural consequences that you may not even know exist. There's sort of like, I'm not going to hire that person because they seem like they can't sit still. But no one calls you and goes like, just so you know, we gave the job to Bob because he sits still better than you. Like no one, like, so you're not hearing it. Like, it's sort of, so you don't really you may not know. It's like, oh, I just didn't get that job.
That's a really good point. I did have Krista, when you were talking, I did have this flash of like, it's almost like a Far Side cartoon or something. Is that our first Gen X reference?
Oh, there it is. Gen F reference.
So like a Far Side cartoon where it's like, in a boardroom meeting where someone kind of has to get up and, he's kind of, he has to kind of get the wiggles out a little bit. Then he sits back down for the rest of the meeting or something. It's like how we are able to like, okay, well, she said adults have learned how to be more controlled. But unfortunately, that goes somewhere, that energy goes somewhere, and it usually gets internalized, and it can create problems. It can create it, anything from like disease to inflammation and other types of situations. So, like controlling yourself within a social construct or a neurotypical type of situation. I mean, you need to kind of understand like, okay, this is how my brain works, and these are the things I need to do so I don't end up getting sick, later in life.
Yeah. I want to tell you this funny anecdote. The very first day I went to work at the golf course, the very first day, we get in there.
Something.
Everyone sits around for an hour. They sit around, talk, get on their phones, stuff for an hour. Well, I started sweeping. I saw dirt and I started sweeping. And my boss came up to me and he's like this, you have ADHD, don't you? Swear to God. I swear.
You're not a proactive employee that cares about the work environment.
No, but like from day one, he almost knew how to kind of handle me. Like, I'm not going to give him too much, like, just remember you only have one thing to do until I tell you there's another thing to do. Like, it's really helped me in not being distracted by everything else I see. Like I want to just do all this other stuff. It's like, stay in your lane. Other people pick up that trash. Now I'm in a position where I can tell people, hey, pick up that trash. You know, the other thing is what it reminded me of what about listening, really listening? Because as someone who is fidgety and has had a hard time sitting still, listening has always been a difficulty. And then what it does is it creates problems and those distressed situations because I don't listen. I don't have the patience to listen. I don't have the patience to read all of the directions, you know, like put a check mark, not an X. Well, I just assumed it was a check mark because this is how we usually do surveys or whatever it is. Like, I don't read all the directions. I skim through and I'm like, I got it. I don't have the patience for it. And it's gotten me into situations and flooded me and caused me distress, as she was talking about. And I've put myself in those situations. And I've learned as I've gotten older to listen better, to not put myself in those situations where I get distressed or flooded, and to not overdo it. Like I you know, like we had talked about several weeks ago, don't think about all the things you got to clean in the house. Start somewhere, start small, just do the laundry or just do that room. Don't, because what ends up, as I know, I found out about myself, I've got stuff everywhere. I've got dishes that I was supposed to do the dishes there. You know, I've got tools everywhere. Now I can't find my keys because I didn't, you know, we know the situation. So I've really tried to, again, listening is a big one, to not put myself in those situations where I get so frustrated.
So I'm going to pause you because I had my my moment and I did not press the start of time on the time. And I know Sarah was looking at the time. We're about 5 minutes, but I don't know where we are.
I think that's about right. I don't know.
Okay, so we have about 5 or 6 minutes, y'all. We can be a little loose with it since I don't know. Anyway, Sarah, go.
Wait, let me think about this. We have time.
Okay, good.
I think.
Yeah.
Timer's not the same. Anyway, we've got time. I was going to actually say it's thinking about how girls aren't diagnosed. All of these symptoms that you gents are describing are things that I experienced as a kid. And as I got older, it shifted, like as a little kid, definitely. Then at puberty, it shifted, but it would flare up monthly. So like when I don't know what part of my cycle, probably like parts of my cycle, but the getting flooded more easily. When I get flooded, going to that secondary emotion of anger, like clockwork, such that it reminded me that at one point, my therapist and I discussed, do I have PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder? Which
they're correlate. I just read something that they're starting to see a correlation between.
I don't think it's a correlation. It's the same damn disease, y'all. But it presents for women as this irritability that happens around, and the people who have it more were probably ADHD as kids, you know, and then at menopause, I'm now having all of these things happen again. And as I've said many times to all of you, and I appreciate you supporting me with this and I'm a words of affirmation. So I've loved that you're like, I meditate, I do yoga, I don't drink coffee or, you know, alcohol or use substances anymore. All of those things were my best friends for a really long time. As a crutch that didn't really stop the failure to keep my cool, the ability, improve my ability to listen, because that impulsive interrupter, God, I've been accused of that my whole, and I interrupted you, Jason, as you started, but I was trying to make a joke, and it still, I thought about it to myself. I'm like, that's still interrupting. And even though dialogue is a give and take, I really sometimes struggle reading the timing of it. I'm so quick and I want to interrupt, and I have to get myself to slow down and listen to the gems that my friends the gifts that my friends are giving me with their words. I'm so happy.
It's hard.
I also wonder too, and I wonder this, I don't know, but as girls, we're, you know, when we're little, we're enculturated to be less than. I mean, in the sense of like, sit down, listen to the boys, like some of the things, like, so even if we may have had the impulse to shake, get up, move around, I don't know if we, I think we have sort of the fear of God in us to like sit our asses down and listen and be quiet.
Right.
And at least our generation. And so I also think that there's something to be said for, we just managed it differently as girls.
Well, you were also
we
way
were
more
told,
mature.
Yeah.
Way
No,
more mature
no.
at a
I'm
young
not
age.
sure about that.
No,
Maybe.
that's an excuse, and I'm gonna say no.
Boys have
No.
nothing. I mean, we're so dumb until we're about 35 anyway.
No, I'm gonna disagree with you
35.
100% because,
45.
and I love you, Rudy, but that's been used as an excuse to manage girls, to overmanage girls. And, I have always
I don't
felt,
think so.
but as a woman, can you really speak to it? I'm telling you that my
I
experience.
am a woman.
Oh, I forgot that.
According to my family members, I'm 75% woman. Honestly.
Beautiful.
Well,
But no, you're right. I can't speak to that.
And I don't mean to just judge your experience either, and I bet it's both. But I will say, I can think of my parent, my dad used to tell me, I can't count the number of times, be more demure, Sarah. Be more like your sister, who is actually ADHD, but she's the inattentive type, so she could handle it. Demure. But you used to make jokes that like what I needed to do was marry rich because and he would then say, I said that because you have expensive taste like me, it's not a gender thing. I'm like, well, you may not have meant it that way, but with all of society pushing that on us as well, it feels that way. And the last thing I would say is that he also said that when I got my yearbook back, he was surprised people liked me as much as they did based on what they had written in my yearbook, because I'm so pushy, because I'm so ADHD, was the subtext. And it's a shocker, but that's
and I was mostly raised by a single, in periods of time by a single mom, because my mom lost her second husband very tragically. And so I was not, I've never, I want to be clear, I've never felt like, I definitely feel like I felt like the pressure of like, be demure, be quiet, sit down. I've just never listened, but it did not come out of me as squirreliness. It came out of me as, I've got some things to say. I need to sit, I'm righteously indignant. Teacher, we need to talk. And, and so it's sort of the warrior came out in me a little bit differently than I think. And I don't know if that's just my, like how I'm made, or if I just made a decision early on that I was not going to be, but I do remember when I was very little in elementary school, man, I remembered all these girls would be like, the biggest thing in my stupid little county was, it was a stupid little county. It's a lovely place, Sebring, Florida. But the biggest thing was, did you win the local beauty pageant? Did you win? Well, obviously all of us couldn't win. That's ridiculous. And so everybody would be like, I got my ribbon. And it wasn't ever something that I was into. And so I got ruthlessly, I don't want to say bullied, but definitely judged for and made fun of for that just not being the thing. And so instead I went and I produced Annie in the library in like 4th grade, where I directed, produced, and was Annie. But come on, talk about someone who's got some extra energy. I just did it. It just wasn't squirrely. Well, it was random performances in the library.
But so Krista, you mentioned like this inner warrior came out. Rudy, you mentioned like, you said getting angry, but it was really forcefully advocating for yourself, maybe, or something like that. And it is really interesting how you will start responding in these social situations. Something is up, right? You're either being targeted, or you're not being understood in a certain way, or you're feeling a little, different.
For sure.
And so like, I think it's really awesome that, finding your inner warrior at that time is, I think it's awesome. I like, as I mentioned, kind of going more into this internal space. I mean, I went to Catholic schooling. I had Catholic schooling, so that's probably was part of it. This guilty feeling and going more internal and kind of getting more, kind of shy and not, there were moments of confidence here and there, but really not feeling very secure in myself for
Yeah, and Jews really
long
press
time.
the guilt. They don't really press the guilt too much.
Yeah.
But I think it's
Right.
why I don't play. I've never played well with others unless I'm at the top. I mean, it's why I've created businesses. I've created like everything. And I don't mean at the top as in like I'm wielding some sort of power, but I mean like the idea was mine. I was able to sort of go, I'm going to set normal and you're going to step into my normal as opposed to me trying to fit into your normal.
How
And
empowering.
That's why, well, it's also just maddening because I didn't do the typical path.
Yeah.
And maybe that's good. And maybe as an adult, I wonder why, but you know what I mean? Like anyway, I know Sarah wants to say, and then we got to wrap up. I'm going to send it to Sarah.
The notes wrap up.
Yeah.
Oh, that was 5 minutes.
Oh,
right.
That's what you said. Okay, good. I thought you were saying I've got something.
No. Oh, I do have things. I mean, I think all the time.
There's no question.
Bingo balls happening in my brain.
Well, it's our 2-minute warning, which is your moment to pull out something incredibly provocative.
Yeah.
Make you think after we can't talk about it. I mean, I just think that we really, I think I miraculously in elementary school had a set of teachers who were so good at supporting what Krista was describing of putting on the show of Annie. So in 4th grade, my besties and I got together and we found out that the boys got to go away to kickball. Have I talked about this?
Yeah, yeah.
So the boys got to go in
cheerleader.
and we were the cheerleaders. That's what we did.
So lame. Oh my God.
We came up with our own everything, outfits, cheer choreography. It was amazing. So,
which is one of the reasons why I want to just hit on that final point of like, when you look at this as it being only a disorder, you diminish the wonderful things that we as free thinkers or different thinkers learn to do in order to create spaces for ourselves in a world that is not necessarily built for us.
I think you explained something very beautifully as far as why we get into these creative, we're allowed to kind of push boundaries and try things out in these creative environments, whether it's being a chef or an actor or, entrepreneur. Rudy, when was that video? Do you know when that was produced or when was that posted? Like what date, what year? Because it's just interesting to me how, it's all about these misconceptions of ADHD and signs of adult ADHD. And I think that's what the video was about, but we kind of really, I think, added onto that considerably in this discussion. And so I was curious.
4 years ago.
When?
4 years ago.
Oh, I mean, I wouldn't have been surprised if it was like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, because it seems like there would be a little bit more of a like this type of discussion with she would have maybe introduced that just seemed to be kind of an antiquated view.
But you know what? No, though, Michael, it's like even 4 or 5 years ago, the medical community has been sort of around the idea of hormones and what they do to us as we get older, and we're coming back around to us having those hormonal conversations, and we know that hormones and the good stuff, the dopamines and the good stuff, have a lot to do with our ADHD. So when you're in a medical community of people who are not taking those things seriously, it's hard to really get a good read on what this is. I think
that's great. That's a great comment.
I mean, I'm going to throw in the biggest wrinkle, but that's exactly right. And since we've only added women to medical studies, mandated since 93, really only ramped up,
suggested since 93, mandated since about a month ago. Thank you.
Exactly. So the fact is we don't have the data. And so 4 years is apparently a lifetime.
Yeah, I'm hearing this. Rudy, great clip, man.
Good one.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that was a really good one. I mean, for Krista, for Sarah, for Michael, for myself, Jason, thanks for listening again to this episode of This Is How My Brain Works.
If you like this episode of This Is How My Brain Works, please like, subscribe, and share. For more info on today's clip, the hosts, and our podcast, check out the show notes. Thanks for listening.